Okay, here are the notes from episode 68. Daniel 9. Daniel's prayer for the people. When Daniel read the prophecy of Jeremiah 25, verse 8 through 11, almost 70 years had passed since he and his fellow Israelites were carried away into captivity. So he'd been a prisoner for 70 years, and they kidnapped him when he was a teenager. 16 to 19 years old, probably. They were young university students. So now he's about 86, I guess. Prophetic truth drove him to his knees. A deep understanding of the Word of God and the will of God motivated Daniel's fervent prayer. The prayers of God's people ought to be, we all should be so moved. Daniel prayed 3 times a day still, as he did when he was a boy. And I think this set him apart from other Jews. I guess that is a model for us to follow. He was very blessed. So if I can do it, I will do it. I just learned of this, so I'm trying to pray more. Daniel confesses the sins of the people as their representative. He's making a case to God to forgive the Israelites, because as he keeps telling God, we're your people, we're on your side, please bless us and continue to start to bless us again, so that people know that you are the real God. God had warned that if the Israelites failed to keep his covenant and disobeyed the law, they would be taken into exile by a foreign nation and restored only because of his faithfulness. For Daniel's prayers and for God, out of God's faithfulness and God's mercy. Rebellious Christians can never do enough to reconcile with God. Only because of God's mercy and faithfulness are they forgiven and restored. The prophecy answers Daniel's prayer in the first 19 verses of this chapter. The 70 weeks of Daniel. In the Jewish religion, the evening took place at 3 p.m. Daniel was in prayer at that time, even though he had been away from Jerusalem and the temple for 70 years. That shows his devotion to God. In all the Bible, only Daniel is referred to as a man greatly beloved. Sorry, there's a fly on the Bible. I guess Satan is trying to stop me from reading the Bible. And only Daniel is referred to as a man greatly beloved. He was the champion of his people in exile, and he embodied the power of an uncompromised life. In his day and in ours, he is a good model to follow. Most scholars believe Daniel 9 verse 24 through 27 is the skeletal outline into which all prophetic events fit. Verse 24 is the entire scope of the prophecy, like a summary statement. Verse 25 offers information about the first 69 weeks. Verse 26 explains the current parentheses. The parentheses is the 2,000 years between the first 483 years and the last 7 years. The last 7 years come after the rapture. Verse 27 offers information on the 70th week. The word for week in the Old Testament actually means 7. In the original text, the verse begins, 77s are determined. In those times, the word 7 often described not a week of days, but a week of years. As it says in chapter 9, verse 2, also Leviticus 25, verse 3 and 4, the 77s of years are prophetic years, totaling 490 years. These 490 years would be cut out of the calendar and belong to the Jews, not the Gentile rulers of the rest of Daniel. There are 2 reasons for the tribulation period. First, it is to purge the Jewish rebels. Second, it is to punish Gentile rejectors. The Bible reaches that during the 7-year period of time, the wrath of God is going to come primarily upon the Jews. But even the Gentiles who have rejected Christ during that time will be objects of wrath. The prophecy of the 70 weeks began when the decree went forth to rebuild the city of Jerusalem. The angel Gabriel told Daniel that 483 years after that decree, Messiah the Prince would come forth. Exactly 483 years later, Jesus entered the city of Jerusalem, I believe it was on a white donkey, and presented himself as Messiah to his people. God's program for Israel, according to Daniel, will encompass a total of 490 years. 483 have already passed, leaving 7 years yet to be fulfilled. The countdown on Daniel's prophecy foretells a period of 69 weeks that will begin on a particular day and end on a particular day. Then there will be a gap in time, and finally there will be the 70th week. We understand that the 69 weeks in Daniel refer to groups of years, and that a week refers to a group of 7 years. So the total is 483 years, or 69 times 7. The separation in Daniel's prophecy after the 69th week, there's a great gap. The great parentheses. Where does that gap come from? In 924, we discover that the 70 weeks, or 490 years, are determined in order for 6 things to happen. To finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, to anoint the most holy. Not one of these prophecies was fulfilled in the first 69 weeks. So there must be a future time for God's people. At that time, the final 7-year tribulation period will begin. The 70th week in Daniel's prophecy. Once the church is raptured out of the world, the final 7-year period of Daniel begins, the tribulation. He, the prince, that's the Antichrist, shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation, which is determined, is poured out on the desolate. The 2 princes identified, Daniel mentions 2 princes, Messiah the Prince, who is Jesus Christ, and the prince who is to come, who is the Antichrist. The 70th week inaugurated. This second prince is going to confirm a covenant with Israel for 7 years and help Israel build the temple and reestablish their sacrifices. The 70th week interrupted. The text says in the middle of the week, halfway through the first prophetic week of 3.5 years after making peace in Israel, through the first prophetic week, or 3.5 years after making peace in Israel, the Antichrist will break the treaty and do away with its Jewish sacrifices. The result will be the Great Tribulation. The last 3.5 years will be when all the world will be bathed in the blood of persecution. The Great Tribulation initiated. That time, the last 3.5 years of the tribulation, called the time of Jacob's trouble, is described in Matthew 24, verses 15 through 21, by Jesus. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, then there will be great tribulation, such has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, nor will such trouble ever be again. Jesus said this will be the most awful time imaginable. All of this must come to pass in order that all the things God has in store for the Jewish people can at least be realized.